Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Path of the Paleontologist. I am very, very excited to introduce all of you to our Path of the Student panel. Every paleontologist starts as a student, but how do you find a school? What classes do you take? This is your chance to find out. I am very, very pleased to welcome some amazing paleontology students today on the panel. Um, why don't we get started and introduce everybody? Billie, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Billie. I was going to say Miss Billie. I'm so used to doing tours. My name is Billie, and I'm a second year master's geology student. And I'm also a collections assistant at the Raymond Alf Museum of Paleontology.
Yeah, go Alf Museum.
Yeah.
Tut, how about you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Tut. I'm a first year master's student at Cal State Fullerton in the Parham Lab. Gabe and I are academic siblings because is an alumnus of that lab in particular. But previous to this, I spent maybe 2 years off from school after I graduated from undergrad in 2018. So if you need advice on breaks in between school, should I take a break? We'll definitely talk about that.
Awesome. Welcome, Tut. Go Titans. Evan, how about you?
Hi, my name is Evan. I am
Hi.
a second year master student at Oklahoma State University, and I study the feeding behavior of Tyrannosaurus and other theropod dinosaurs. I'm going to put Mr. Rexy down for a little bit.
Welcome, Evan. Lynnea, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lynnea. I'm a first year master's student at the University of Minnesota. I'm studying a basal sauropodomorph. Um, so I'm studying vertebrate paleontology, and I have a geology degree from Michigan State University. Um, yeah, I think that's it.
Cool. Well, welcome. And last but not least, Jeanette Pirlo.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Pirlo. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Florida, Florida Museum of Natural History in Gainesville, Florida. I study paleoecological reconstruction of a new fossil site here in Florida, focusing on proboscidean relatives or gomphotheres. So doing diet reconstruction, niche oh my god, my brain just froze. Looking at how different herbivores split up the environment, and food competition, that sort of thing. And I have a marine biology degree from the University of California in Santa Cruz.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the panel.
Great.
Like I said, the path of the paleontology today is about showing all of you the many different ways it takes to become a paleontologist, whether you're working to work in curation, collections, research. We hope to share stories, provide advice, and answer your questions on helping you discover your path of a paleontologist. Speaking of stories, how about we all kind of share your own personal story of how you kind of got into paleontology as a student now or even before that? Billie, why don't we start with you?
Oh yeah, okay. This is yeah. So I did not always know that paleontology was going to be for me. In fact, being any kind of sciences was not something that I wanted to do. When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be a comedian, which I still kind of am. But like, no, just kidding. But yeah, like I was not encouraged to pursue school, and that wasn't like my main focus as a kid. You might hear a lot of paleontologists, who say, I've always known I wanted to be a paleontologist forever. And I did go through quite a bit of a struggle with learning and having a lot of deficits in my learning as well. And when I started in community college, and I've always loved science. It always was interesting to me. I didn't see myself as a scientist or anything like that, though. And yeah, I started off as an anthropology major, and I actually got my bachelor's in anthropology. So it's quite a switch as well. And it wasn't until I took a geology course where they went over dinosaurs, and we actually took a field trip to the Raymond M Museum of Paleontology, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And I read books on paleontology, specifically Your Inner Fish by Neil Shubin, which really inspired me. And I just really got into paleontology after that. And it's become such a passion of mine, especially because I didn't start off knowing that this was what I was going to do, nor did I think that this was, accessible to me to be a scientist. Like if you would have told, younger me as a teenager, that I would be a scientist, I would not believe it at all. Like I would think like scientists are super smart though. I'm not super smart, So how am I going to be a scientist? So yeah, it's definitely, something that I think is where I just want to share a lot of knowledge with everybody just because of that. It's like you can be a scientist, does not matter what kind of educational background you've had. But that's basically how I got into paleontology and where I'm at today.
Thanks, Billie.
Uh-huh.
Tut, how about you? What's your story?
Mine is somewhat similar to Billie's in that I didn't always know that I was going to end up being a paleontologist. I definitely had a very strong dinosaur phase when I was a very small kid. And around the age of 6, my parents were like, Tut, you're a big kid now, right? Aren't dinosaurs for babies? And I was like, yes, I'm a big kid. Dinosaurs, go away. And it wasn't until I got to my undergrad at UC San Diego that I started to realize how integral fossils are to understanding modern biology and just science in general. And so that kickstarted me wanting to be a paleontologist. I actually went into undergrad undeclared because I just straight up was like, I'm either going to be a musician or I'm going to be an engineer, but I don't know. And then I started taking these biology classes. And after that passion got reignited, I decided I'm going to double major in geology and biology because, as most schools, there is no paleontology at UC San Diego. They have like a paleontologist. He doesn't work on dinosaurs, and that was fine. I just worked with what I had. And over the years, I've been lucky enough to consistently network with really, really good people who are more than happy to back me up because they're just good people. So yeah, and then I ended up at Cal State Fullerton because it's a pretty good school and Jim Parham's a good guy. I have an affinity for working with really good people.
Shout out to Dr. James Parham, advisor of the Parham Lab, my advisor as well. Evan, how about you? What's your story?
Yeah, so I wanted to be a paleontologist since I was a young child, and some of the events that helped fuel my passion for paleontology was going to the Field Museum of Natural History, watching various dinosaur videos like Walking with Dinosaurs, Jurassic Park, The Land Before Time, books, as well as the encouragement from both my mother and grandmother.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. Lynnea, how about you?
So I wanted to be a paleontologist since I was 7. I went to the Field Museum with my parents when I was 7, and they had this whole exhibit where you can dig up dinosaur bones. And then there were a bunch of people there volunteering to show you how everything worked and what you can learn from fossils. And I thought it was super cool. And so I decided I wanted to be a paleontologist. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do for basically my whole life growing up, but I kind of fell off of actually learning anything about paleontology, and I didn't really do anything with it until I got towards the end of high school, and I started thinking about what do I really want to do. So that's how I went to MSU and got a geology degree. Because like Tut said, there's not really many paleontology programs, so I did geology and I took classes in the biology department as well, because I knew I wanted to do vertebrate paleontology, so I took anatomy, and then I looked at places that I might want to go for grad school, and I just looked at who is doing research that I thought was interesting. And that's how I found Pete McAvicky, who is my current advisor. He's here at University of Minnesota, and so I applied to work with him, and here I am.
Awesome. Thanks, Lynnette. And also, really quick, I remember in your Fossil Friday chat, you talked how you visited the Alf Museum, too, when you were a kid, right?
Yeah. Shout out to Alf Museum.
Gotta promote the place. And last but not least, Jeanette, how about your story?
So I did not know anything about paleontology before I came to Florida. I have always just wanted to work with animals. I remember being like 5 or 7 watching Shark Week back when Shark Week was Shark Week and not what it is now. My dad, and telling my dad, like, I want such a great white shark. And he's like, yeah, whatever, sweetie, like, go do something else, right? Like, you're not going to work. And so I moved from the Central Valley of California to the ocean so that I could get a degree in marine biology. And my thought was to go to grad school working, doing something with sharks or marine biology, but I had no idea how to get into grad school. I wasn't prepared. Like, I didn't have any internship experience or anything. It had taken me a long time to even get to a point where I could graduate with my bachelor's. And then I met my advisor by chance. I was taking a vertebrate paleontology class in Santa Cruz, so similar to Tut's experience. There is a geology program, but I didn't care about it. I didn't like paleontology. I thought it was dumb, no offense. I also never liked dinosaurs. For all of the dinosaur researchers, I still don't like dinosaurs. They're cool, but they just never caught my fancy. I was always, like, struck by modern animals and how had they lived for so long, but I didn't understand that paleontology could explain that to me. So I met with my now advisor, and I was just like, I don't know who this man is, but he's buying lunch for a bunch of students at Santa Cruz, so I guess I'll chat with him. And then he invited me out to my first dig in Florida, and he was paying for the trip, and I was like, yeah, I'll take a free trip. Like, I'm going to graduate, and I'm going to get a free trip. Like, I don't have money to go to Florida. I've never been. I'll take a free trip. And then I found my first fossil and I lost my mind. And I started plotting how I was going to convince him to let me do this again, to like let me continue digging. And little did I know that was his plan all along, to ask me to be his student. So it wasn't until I actually found a fossil that I realized that paleontology offered so much more to modern animals' story. And I'm really glad that I met him by chance, and I found my first turtle shell. I don't study turtles because I don't. I have no reason to, but I want to ask Tut more about his research because turtles are pretty cool. But it's because of my experience that I decided to do a side project and work with underserved communities. So similar to Billie's story, I too went to community college, and because we're so busy trying to pay for school and like stay in school and do well, like I struggled so much with math that I didn't have a chance to internship anywhere and get that experience. So a big portion of my dissertation includes providing paid internships for undergrads from community colleges in the collections here at Florida. And I'm really excited because we just met yesterday and they start in a couple weeks. So I'm super jazzed about that program too. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeanette. I think there's a lot of really great similarities in our stories about like how we became students, or like, how people are in there. I say we, I'm not a student anymore. I gotta stop saying that. But let's kind of get into the thick of it all, right? How does one become a student in paleontology? What is the graduate application like, right? Let's talk about funding and like, what is just that experience like, trying to figure out a school to work with and getting in your paperwork and all that stuff. Anybody want to start?
So I will say that that's something I'm still learning, because I am looking into PhD programs. And I was very limited in my choices because I do have two daughters and I didn't want to uproot them and move anywhere big. And so there was only two schools very close to me that were my choices. And I ended up going with a school that had mentors that I could connect with that were really down to earth. So I think that was the biggest piece of advice that I was given, is to find someone that you can work with and that somebody you connect with and click with, someone that's there for you. And that has been definitely the case in my program. And they also understood that I was coming in as an anthropology graduate and not a someone who has been studying the geology sciences, you know, the whole time. In fact, you know, when I first got into community college, I'll be really honest, I learned that you get financial aid, and I was like, what, free money, like just to take classes? I'm so in for this, right? Because I was just like a poor student. I'm still poor, but still, like, I was like, okay, free money, like I'll take classes. And then like I got into, you know, my first semester at a community college, and I loved everything about it. And I didn't think that I would succeed in college. In fact, I came in with a 7th grade reading and math level. And I know this because I was on welfare, and so I took a assessment test. And the assessment test, they were either going to put me in the working field or they're going to put me in school. And they were like, yeah, we're not going to pay for you to go to school because you're like you tested really low in your math and reading, so we want you to work instead. But I was like, oh, okay, I guess. But when I went into college, and so I already had this mindset, like, I'm not going to succeed, right? Because I'm not smart. And I, you know, took these classes, and I really, really, really pushed myself, and I actually made Dean's List my first semester. So like, I really, really pushed myself. And, you know, later on, I didn't know what I was doing. I never had anybody in my family go to college. So I was just taking classes here and there. And so I'm a really seasoned student. I've been in school since 2011, and I'm, you know, barely, you know, finished the first year in my master's program. So it's like been a long time. And so I still didn't know what to do when I transferred over to a master's program, or when I transferred from a community college to a four-year university. It was all new to me. And so now, like with the master's program, I found someone that I could work with. I asked people around me, what should I do to get into grad school? Start way in advance, getting your materials together. I would say a year in advance, to really look around, connect with professors, email them before you apply, make sure they're taking students. You don't want to apply and they're not taking students, and then you wasted money on application fees. And also look into waivers for application fees, because I missed out on that too. Like, so I learned a lot on what not to do because I, you know, missed the application fee, so I had to pay for the application. There's also GRE waivers as well, and I didn't know about the GRE waivers, so then I missed that as well, so then I had to pay for the whole GRE. But all these things do have waivers that you could apply for, or, you know, funding that you could apply for that I wish I would have known in advance. So definitely look into those things, and just pick a professor that you could work with, that they're interested in what you're doing and that you're interested in what they're doing, and just somebody that you really connect with. So that would be the thing that I would say to do. And as far as funding goes, I'm still learning about the funding, because I'm, like I said, I'm looking into PhD programs, and I want that to be fully funded, you know, so we'll see.
I'll also add in too. So during my undergraduate, I was studying under Dr. Kinshu Shimada, and I was also a McNair Fellow. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about both DePaul was that the McNair program, they actually gave us advice for what to be doing in grad school. And so one of the things that both Shimada and McNair had emphasized is that make sure that you are studying under a professor that has your best interests at heart, really cares about you, and also can give you advice. And going back to what Billie said, it's always good to make sure that you're in a program where you can actually learn more about funding, as well as fee waivers, because that has really helped a lot for me. And then also putting in for fellowship applications.
Yeah, I agree with all of this, but I think the scary part is, how do you know that you found a good advisor? And you know, like, I knew no one in paleontology. I didn't know, you know, what my advisor's role was in the field or anything. And one of the things that we talk often with students that are asking advice is, you know, talk to other grad students in the program, talk to past students, talk to current students, talk to, you know, other postdocs that have been there, and get a feel for that advisor, because that sometimes is scary, because you don't know, you know, they're publishing all these papers, like, they sound fantastic, fantastic as a professional, but do they have their best interest for me as a student in in mind? And talking to other people that also work in the lab, I think, is really important when selecting your next advisor.
Yeah, grad school applications are a very daunting task. It's a very overwhelming time trying to find someone who you're putting your trust in to help you on this career path. And it's going to be a lot of work to go to grad school. And so you want someone who's really going to support you and help you. And finding someone like that is really hard, especially when you maybe don't even know where to start. So first, you have to look for someone who's doing something that you're interested in. And so you can just read papers, or you could just even do a Google search of maybe something that you're interested in learning about and see who is researching that currently. So who's putting papers out. Especially, it's really good to network. So that might also be hard if you don't know that many people, but you talk to paleontologists. A lot of them are super friendly and really willing to help you and give you leads on who might be interesting to work with. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to people. Send emails. The worst that can happen is they don't respond, and then you can send another email and see what happens. But yeah, it's a really scary process to try to plan your life and, be willing to uproot everything. And yeah, that's really hard to try to find out who you're going to work with and put your faith in. So definitely talk to the students, former, current, see how they feel about the advisor that you might be wanting to work with. Like the GRE, you have to take that. A lot of schools require that you send in your GRE scores, but GRE is ridiculous. So a lot of schools are now getting away from basing your acceptance on the GRE score. So that shouldn't be too much of a consideration. But yeah, just find someone who you think is going to represent you the best and help support you.
So one thing I forgot to mention was that during my undergrad, I also took classes with Shimada. So one thing that you should probably consider is to see if you can actually take a class or shadow a person's class to see how they are as a professor, but also how they are as an advisor too. That way you can get a better feel for them.
I was going to make another suggestion on funding. So a lot of fossil clubs, regional, like in your area, wherever you're at, offer, research grants. The Paleo Society offers research grants. Sometimes your department will have small grants, and all of those small grants add up. So never don't poo-poo a small, like $500 grant or $1,000 grant. Like all of that money adds up, and then you start when you compile that on your CV and you realize like how much money you've brought in is overwhelming, because you're like, oh my god, how did I get this much when they were just such small grants? But also in the long run, that looks really good to future employers or other departments that you're applying to, because it shows that you're committed to looking for funding for yourself, that you're not expecting for your education to be paid for on your own. Or by your department, but that you're looking for funding, because if you do go into academia, you're constantly applying for grants. So getting that experience early is really important.
Yeah, definitely the shmoney is important. And I think that a lot of people might be a little like, oh, I will never get that grant. It's too competitive. And the same thing with scholarships. They are not. Like I've learned, like when I won my first scholarship, it was just a little baby scholarship. It was like $300. But then I realized like, oh my God, like I could get a scholarship and they give me money. Like, and then I lived off of scholarships, like, and for a very long time. So they are definitely something that you can get.
And ask people that have gotten those scholarships to help you apply for them, because we're really excited to share how we got our money and to help you craft your applications as well. So just like reaching out to professors you want to work with, a lot of funding agencies will list previous winners. Don't be scared to reach out to previous winners, because I think it's like our science. We like talking about how we were successful. So we'd be, I know in my experience, I would be happy to help people write their grants or applications.
Definitely. Networking is so important when it comes to trying to break into any field, especially in paleontology. And especially in the digital age, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, it's a great way to connect with people. And a lot of paleontologists are on social media, very happy to chat. All of our emails are pretty much online on like our school websites or, our institutions. So send an email, ask them, like Lynnea said. So moving on to the next part, let's talk about what it's like actually being in grad school or like in school itself. Like, what is kind of like your day to day? And also, I want to acknowledge that the last couple years have been very, very different for most students. So we can talk about kind of how that experience is very different from what you expected as well. Why don't we start with Tut? What's it like being a grad student for you?
It has been supremely strange, especially after taking 2 years working, because that dynamic, when you go from I have no experience, I've only been at university, whether it's community college, whatever you're doing to get your bachelor's, right? You're essentially a little baby then. And when you take time off to go work, you're learning on the job, and that's putting yourself in I felt like I was putting myself in situations that were often over my head, but they forced me to learn at a pace and an intensity that is honestly really hard to replicate. And so transitioning back into school, pandemic aside, has been really tough, because I relish in adversity. I relish in being on a team, working with people, improvising, and solving problems that are extremely tough in the moment, and then you laugh about it later and you're like, oh, that was actually pretty straightforward, but good Lord, we thought we were going to die. That's not that. Yeah, it's just been super yeah, just it's been okay. I mean, I'm going to be real, I'm trying to appreciate what I've been getting out of it, but it's been hard. And that extra layer of my own personal history has made it probably harder than it otherwise would be had I gone straight into school. So that's just me.
Thanks for being honest with us, Tut. Who else wants to share? Anybody? Floor is open.
I was just going to say to Tut, as someone who has taken a really long time to get to grad school, I've seen other students that have gone into grad school right after undergrad. And this is not, to throw shade on anyone who has done this, but there are some students who aren't prepared to work on teams because they haven't worked in the real world. They don't have other work experience. They've only done school. So having that experience of working outside of school and working on a team and learning how to do a lot of problem solving and, the interpersonal skills that come with working in other jobs are super helpful when it comes to grad school, because you get into grad school and you realize there's a ton of politics involved in grad school and in your department, and learning how to navigate that. Sometimes not having that experience outside of school isn't helpful, but having that experience now, that you can do anything you set your mind to, right? Like, you've had these difficult tasks that you've been able to pull through with working in a team, and that's really what academia is. It's not a singular person's activity. It's really teamwork and interpersonal skills and research and going back and figuring out how to do things. So don't feel bad that you've taken some time off. Like, it'll be helpful in the long run, I promise.
Thanks, Jeanette. That definitely makes me feel better. And I'm really glad for the time that I took off, actually. Like, it's more, just going from that environment to this, especially because it's been so isolating, has made it more arduous, I would say. But I do not regret for a second the time that I took off from school. It was amazing. It was very good.
Yeah, and something else I would probably like to bring up is that I myself took a gap year after undergrad, but one of the things that I thought was good was that I actually familiarized myself with what I wanted to study, and upon entering OSU, I really found myself like starting to become more independent, so making a schedule, a to-do list, and even before the pandemic, it was still just like, okay, it's now time for me to be independent, and I gotta start making my own schedule on what I need to be doing. So, had to set aside time for classes, then also time for research, but also making time for myself, which is something that I would definitely encourage for a lot of students. Like, don't be afraid to ask for advice from both other students and also from your professors on like, hey, I think I need some help with like making a schedule on what I need to be doing. Can you give me some advice on this?
Yeah, there's really no way around it, but grad school is just hard. And my advisor described it like drinking water from a fire hose because there's such a steep learning curve of just so much information being thrown at you all at once. And then you have to learn how to navigate the politics of the department. There's a lot of bureaucratic things that go on in the department, which if you're not familiar with academia, then you're not going to really know how it works. Academia can be isolating sometimes because you're focused, like narrow, one track minded on your own research, and it's hard to see like the bigger picture of like other hobbies or interests that you might want to do when you're so focused on devoting all your time to your research. So that's why it's really important to be your own advocate, and you have to make sure that you feel comfortable with the pace that you're going. If you need help with anything, you have to make sure that you know who to go to and who to ask and know where those resources are going to be provided to you because it's really hard. There's a lot to learn. Um, but it's really important to make sure that you enjoy what you're doing. You know, you're not going to have a good time if you're not enjoying what it is that you're studying. So it is really exciting to be able to meet people in your lab, in your department, and get a new group of people to hang out with that have the same interests. And I think that has really been like the saving grace of me coming to Minnesota. Because that was such a hard transition. I went to grad school right out of my undergrad, but that was all thrown off because I've been here for a year and I have like only been in the building a few times, you know, because pandemic and Minneapolis itself has been having a really hard time. So it's just been a really horrible situation to be in, especially to start grad school and feel like I don't know anyone here. Basically, just doing grad school from my apartment. But it's been really nice to be able to meet so many great people who are willing to help me. And my other grad students in my lab and in the Paleo group have been so nice and welcoming and friendly and helpful. And so meeting other people in your department and in your lab group who are willing to be there for you and help you has really been amazing for me. And I think that you'll find that in a lot of paleo groups, a lot of people are really, really willing to help and reach out and be supportive.
Thanks, everybody. Um, let's move on to a kind of a difficult subject. And before I start this, I just want to give a trigger warning to our audience at home. We are going to be discussing some aspects of mental health. So if this is something that you may not want to, discussion that you may not want to be a part of, you can turn off the screen for now. So, for a lot of folks in academia, there is this concept that it's a grind culture. If you're not working, you're not doing something. You're not working towards your goal. You always have to be working. There's this idea. And for a lot of folks, that can affect your mental health, right? So for those of you in the panel today, what is some advice you would give to help those kind of make sure they know how to take care of themselves and deal with the realities of grad school. And like Lynnea said, it can be hard.
Yeah, I could start with this one. So yeah, mental health is something that I've struggled with, and it's been a big, detriment when it comes to like writing papers or having to be perfect about something and not feeling inadequate around other people. And it definitely affects how your mood and how you finish things. And I'm someone who has not only, grad school to worry about, but like I said, I have two daughters, as well as, I work two jobs. And I also, on top of that, help host a podcast. So my life is really busy. And, one way I'd like to introduce you to my friend. This is my planner with the little bat on it. It's so cute. But the planner is what really gets me, through my time, like what I'm going to dedicate my time to as far as academics go, family life goes, and trying to like find that healthy balance, but also putting me time in, making sure I have that me time. It's not just school that just takes over or learning that just takes over. You don't always have to just do academic stuff all the time. You could, one of the things I like to do is I like to work out and I like to cook, which kind of conflicts, but that's what I like to do. I like to put on, a show with cooking. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll probably see like all these posts of me cooking food and then also working out the next day, things like that. And so that time is really important to me to get that like time for myself. And then also, going back to the previous conversation about like how this is for you as a grad student, how's your life as a grad student? It has been very different because of this year. I just got into grad school. I had like maybe 2 semesters where I got to see people, and then all of a sudden it's just completely closed off and you're not really getting that grad school experience. And that's been depressing, like I have not been able to see people. And one of the biggest things that I benefit from is social justice. And I like to do a lot of like panel discussions on social issues and have discussions and like, and I have not been able to do that this year. And that's something that's very fulfilling for me. Ever since I started school, I've always been involved in extracurricular activities like clubs, where I would like either be the president of or vice president of or something. And I would put together panel discussions about various topics, and it was always the social justice topics as well, not just physical sciences. And that's something I have not been able to do this year. Through the podcast, I kind of been able to do that, but it's not as fulfilling as actually going out there and like feeling like I impact somebody. So that's been very difficult as well for this year. And I feel like this year has been very difficult for a lot of people that already deal with mental health issues. So for me, I suffer from depression and anxiety. I have a lot of anxiety about things. And if I don't submit something on time or if the deadline's getting closer, I freak out. And so I try to just keep a schedule and plan things where I have me time so that I'm not always just consumed by that. So I think that's important.
Yeah, and something that I've also learned too is that like I remember like 2 years ago, I was in Tulsa, I was talking with everyone, the professors and students, but then the pandemic happened, and so things have been kind of like interesting for me, however. And one of the things that I've always been figuring out is like, how am I going to do my research? How am I going to just keep myself together? And of which it was kind of like just trial and error. So some of the things that I've started doing is just more like making a schedule, but also taking care of my own mental health. So like some of the things that I do is that like I go outside for walks and I go to the gym, but I also feel free to like just give my mind and body time to rest and just take a break, because one of the things that I've always learned, and something that I think, something just to pick off from what Billie said, is that like it's always good to just give yourself a schedule and make yourself a to-do list, but also set aside time for yourself. So we need like times to just get some fresh air, but also like just time to just take a break from our own work and all.
And not feel guilty for taking that break, right? Like oftentimes, like this semester has been probably the hardest of my entire time at UF. This past semester it just ended, and like not beating myself up for taking a break and not not completing a task that I wanted to do on my to-do list. And I think oftentimes that is a lot of the guilt associated with grad school. Like, well, I'm not doing anything. It's a Sunday afternoon. I should, I guess, go do research. But like forcing yourself to actually take a break and just if you prefer taking a nap, lie on the couch and not do anything, or go outside, or I try to take my cat for walks. It's more like I drag him around. But like try to do those other activities and not feel bad for doing them, recognizing that you are working 40, 60 hours a week, or not, if not more, and that it's okay to take, a couple hours a day or more, really, to just not do work and not, like focus on other activities. If you like to crochet, I know a lot of people that like to knit or crochet, or do, arts and crafts, to do something different from, sitting at your computer staring at a blank screen because you keep putting off a paper for the past 2 years. Not like it's a personal experience or anything, but just, reminding yourself to not feel guilty for taking time for yourself, I think, is the most important.
Yeah, definitely. Can you hear me?
No.
Okay. I said it was muted. But yeah, definitely don't feel bad if you don't finish everything on your to-do list. A lot of times I just move it to the next day or move it next week or something, so it's not always like you have to stick on it. I just circle it and be like, move to Thursday, so definitely don't feel bad about that.
I think this pandemic experience of grad school has kind of forced me to learn also, like, everything that everybody is saying here is excellent. This is all super applicable. But for me as well, not just forcing myself to take breaks, but also forcing myself to parse out what is within my control and what is outside of my control. So much, like, my entire academic year has been spent devoid of handling any specimens, which is absolutely key to the research that I have to do. And also, like, yeah, it's been tough because I've been having to balance between, like, taking care of myself and teaching. If you take on a TA position, a teaching assistantship, then there are a lot of responsibilities with that. And a huge thing about that is time. And over the course of this year, I kind of realized, like, I love communicating science, but I have learned that I don't care so much for teaching, at least in the virtual classroom. And because of that, I realized, like, okay, I must do my thesis. I have to do whatever I can with my thesis. That's not really in my control. I have to take the classes that I need to finish the coursework, but I really don't have to teach. That is something within my control. So I actually am setting that aside next year. That's part of this learning experience. You need to figure out what it is that you can control and let go of everything else. If there are things that are affecting you, but you can't do anything to change it, then sometimes it's the healthiest thing to do to just say, I'm going to just set that aside, let it breathe, go for a walk, take a break, play my guitar, which I've been doing a lot lately. That's been helping me out. So hobbies, mental health, being outside, all of these things are helpful.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask for help. That's something that I need to learn to still do. When I'm going through something, I feel like I don't want to be a burden on anyone else. So I don't want to, like, reach out and be like, here's my problems. That's something that I'm still learning. So I need to practice what I preach, but definitely, reach out, seek help. People, are there for you. And yeah, it's like, it's definitely something that, throughout my whole academic career, I think one big thing that has impacted me too is comparing myself to others. When I go into a classroom, when I go to a conference, I don't look like them. I don't sound like them. I'm not as smart as them. All of that stuff impacted me mentally. Like, do I belong here? Do I belong in academia? And sometimes I know almost everyone that every time I say something about that, everybody can relate. Everybody could say, I have this imposter syndrome to some degree. And that's definitely something that has impacted me, where it's like, I feel like I should quit because I don't, like, look, sound, or come from similar backgrounds. but that's okay. That's what actually makes science better, is that you're including these different mindsets, you're including different backgrounds, and that actually allows science to progress. So definitely feel like you belong there, because every science is for everybody, and it helps it progress.
And reach
I was
different
gonna
corners
say,
of
oh,
the world.
sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and reach different corners of the world that normally wouldn't have reached, right? Like we all come from different backgrounds, and would paleontology have been talked about in my household? Probably not. But now that conversation has started, so being a part of it, we get to share it with people who maybe wouldn't have known about it before.
I was just going to say imposter syndrome is super, super common. And it's really easy to feel overwhelmed and feel like you don't know anything and like you don't belong in a certain environment, especially academia. Um, and all of that is just not true because that's just the way that the system has been set up for us to think that we don't belong somewhere. But the reality is that we're doing the work and we're working really hard. And so we do belong in this system.
Absolutely. And thank you all so much for your openness and your candor and all of this. One thing I want to add, when I was a student is, it's okay, and don't be afraid to ask for professional help also when you feel like you need it. When I was going through grad school, I had therapy, I was on medication as well. And for if you feel like the people around you just aren't enough, that's okay to ask for professional help to help get you through this very hard thing that you're doing. Grad school is hard. So don't feel like it's a weakness to ask for professional help if you need it, because your mental health is one of the most important things. And on top of that, also, another piece of advice is find a good support group, right? I have amazing friends when I was in grad school who are still my friends. Jeanette, Tut, Evan, Lynnea, Billie. I met all of you when I was a grad student still. And, all of you have been very, very supportive and helpful. And finding that support group can mean a huge difference. Someone who you can text and complain about this assignment, we all love our advisors, but every now and then we want to complain about our advisors sometimes. And, you got to have someone to be able to do that with. And so having that support group is very, very important. Well, thank you all so much for that part. I think it's time now we can move on to the question and answer portion. We have a lot of wonderful questions from our audience, and now I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. What we'll do is I'll ask the question, and because there's so many, let's have maybe one or two folks try to answer them. If you want to answer it, raise your hand, and we'll try to call you, or just chime in, and then we'll try to move through as many as we can. So I have to scroll all the way up. The first question we have is from indoor Uncle Mo is asking, volunteering is always a good way to get anything. Any recommendations for volunteering?
I can take that one. Volunteering at museums is a really great opportunity. I love museums, so definitely go support your local museum, especially the Alf Museum, um, and see if there's any opportunities available, especially if you can volunteer and work with paleontologists or maybe as a docent or something like that, especially get opportunities to do outreach. And then that'll be a great way to learn a lot about the field and also meet new people.
And then there's opportunity from that, right? Like you started networking by volunteering in these spaces. Sometimes there might be a paid position that comes out of it, because volunteering is great, but if you get paid to do what you love, it's even better. And you start getting to know people, you might be able to start developing research projects, and then who knows where it spirals from there.
Thanks. So next question is from username Katie. Any advice for someone wanting to study paleontology in their undergrad with learning challenges? Billie, I think you're on mute still.
I'll take that one
Okay.
because that's something definitely I've struggled with. I went through the foster care system, and they don't lay down the foundation for you to really succeed in college, and you miss out on all our school for moving around a lot. So all of my grade school was like completely blank, and I did suffer from a lot of learning deficits because of that. And I think one of the I guess a piece of advice I would share is find the way that you learn best, because one of the ways that I've learned that I've learned best is by teaching, right? And all the information that I get, I try to tell somebody right away about it so that I, really synthesize that information. It does take a lot more effort when you have these kind of deficits. Personally, like I would spend so much more time like in the lab. I would be there like the last one in the lab or the last one taking a test and things like that. And it always made me feel like, oh man, like I don't get it. But then I would pass with A's, and I would do really good. Not that you have to have A's either. Like, don't let that be like the goal. It's just I put in more work, more hours to do that. And then also utilize tutors. Don't forget that there's tutors there, and ask for help. Or from peers that you might know. That networking comes in there because, like, when I took geological mapping, like that, like blew my mind. But I was at Gabe's like office, and I was like at Jared's lab who's going to come on later. And I was like, please help, so don't be afraid to ask for help there either. And utilize tutors and find the way that you learn best, whether that's through, visually learning or maybe just listening to material, reading, whatever it is for you. Yeah.
Go ahead, Evan.
And something else too is that like you don't just have to read a scientific article in undergrad. One of my favorite books to read during undergrad and also during my gap year was the Tyrannosaur Chronicles by Dr. David Hone. And that book was really helpful because it really got me thinking more about Tyrannosaur research, but also it did like always cite like which articles that I should use, that I should look into or use as reference material, because I was able to grasp that a lot quicker than from a journal article. So one thing I would probably recommend is like feel free to read just like scientific books.
Thanks, Evan. One more piece of advice I'll give too. This one coincides with another question from Azim, who's asking, what advice do you have for a student with disability to get into paleontology? I'm a low vision person who very much interested in studying paleontology. I think go inside with, disabilities, learning and things like that. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and ask for accommodations from your school or whatever institution you have. Institutions have to and will give accommodations. You just have to ask and advocate for yourself. So don't see any of these as a weakness or being less than. These are just things that are part of whoever you are. There are ways for you to be in paleontology. There is a place for you. Just do not be afraid to advocate. And if it's something that gives you anxiety, to ask for as well, there are departments in all of your schools or institutions where you can go to help them advocate for you so that you can participate, and there can be like equity within your programs. So that is a very important thing that I think a lot of people are afraid of and don't want to do. But please do not be afraid to advocate for yourself and whatever you need to be able to succeed in this field, because it's hard. All right. So the next question.
I have a thought real quick.
Oh, go ahead, Jeanette.
And if you haven't heard of Dr. and I'm sorry for my terrible pronunciation, Vermeij at UC Davis. He is a amazing paleontologist who also happens to be blind. And he has definitely been a huge role model in what we can achieve, even when we don't have the normal abilities that are expected in academia.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Jared McGowan, who's asking, how often might you have needed to change or switch your research subjects from one topic to another after initially becoming an academic paleo student?
I'll take that. So I I arrived to UF planning on starting a master's. So I moved to Florida a few months before so I missed the original application deadline. So I took a gap year in between my undergrad and my PhD, after taking a really long time to even get to my bachelor's. But my plan was to start a master's 3 days before the application was due. My advisor was like, so we should talk about you maybe getting a PhD instead of a master's. So there was that instant, like I had to change my mindset of 2 to 3 years in Florida to maybe 5 or more. And did I have the research questions that could develop into a PhD dissertation as opposed to a shorter thesis? And then in the middle of my PhD research, I was applying for an NSF graduate fellowship, graduate research fellowship, and my application was written. It was a month before the deadline, and my advisor was just like, I don't know if your project's cool anymore. You should consider changing your research topic. And I was just like, okay, from what? Like, I'm studying, paleo sharks. Like, what do I go for? He's like, what about some terrestrial elephants? And I'm like, I know nothing about the terrestrial system. So I go from a modern marine biology mindset to a paleo mindset in 6 months, to a marine paleo mindset, to writing a grant application over a month, and submitting it on a system I had never considered. Elephants are cool, whatever, but I'd never thought about them. I'd always loved sharks. I understood marine ecology. I didn't understand, terrestrial ecology. So it happens really quickly, and you just have to be prepared in the mindset of like things might change, and you're allowed to be mad that things change, but still like focus and revel in that new challenge. I think oftentimes as academics we really enjoy the challenge of learning new things, and so seeing it in that mindset of like, this isn't a setback, this is just a new challenge and a new way to learn things, is really important. But I do think that oftentimes your research changes, and you just have to accept it and move with it. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeanette.
Yeah.
Here's another question from Akshansh Walimbe, who's asking, what subject should I study at university to become a vertebrate paleontologist?
I'll chime in on this. If you can major in either geology, as in make that your focus area of study, then that is going to help you a lot. And if you decide on biology, you should at least try to take 1 or 2 classes in geology. I have found that, like, in terms of the field in general, there has been a shift toward knowing anatomy and being very intimately familiar with how skeletons work. But if you're thinking about doing any kind of field work for volunteering or even as jobs, then at least having that very introductory foundation of how rocks work is going to help you a lot in that.
And I would just like to add that definitely agree with you. But also include social sciences, because I think that makes you a well-rounded scientist. As a paleontologist, you're probably going to have to travel sometimes even out of the country, and having social sciences as a background really helps in like respecting others' cultures, and how to interact, and also just the ethics of paleontology, because that is also part of it. I'm someone who had a lot of social science classes and philosophy background and ethics and things like that, and I feel that has really helped in my career as well. So definitely include those. Most universities require you to take social science classes, but really invest yourself and in those classes. I feel like that just makes you a well-rounded scientist in general.
Definitely. Yeah, like, be well-rounded in general. Like, if you have a class that you're interested in, it doesn't have to do with your major. If you have electives, take it. You never know what skills will apply. I took a bunch of art classes when I was in my undergrad, and those have helped me immensely, learning how to use Photoshop, video editing. I even took an acting class, which helped anyway, because now I'm better at public speaking. Sure, I had to do a soliloquy or whatever it was called as my final, but it all worked. So don't be afraid to take classes. You never know what skills will apply. Here's a question that has kind of been asked a few times, and I think is a common question. What's a good school? How do you find a good school? I mean, there's like things like Virginia Tech just now is offering their paleobiology option with their geosciences major. You've got University of Montana, UC Berkeley. But for all of you, like, how do you answer that? What is a good school, and how do you find one?
I would say that maybe it's not so much about the school, but the person that you're working with. Because there's a lot of paleontology programs that are really great and really prestigious, but oftentimes if you go to people who are super prestigious, then you might not get as in-depth of an advising experience. So I would say look for an advisor who is going to help you learn and maybe not so much a name of a school.
And someone who can, sorry, Evan, someone who can network for you, who's willing to introduce you to other people. So it's not just what you learn, but it's also who your network is, and grow your network from there.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Evan.
and something else I would like to add is that like think about what research you want to learn. So during my undergrad, I was much very big into studying dinosaurs, but when I was studying under Dr. Shimada, I was learning more about like I was doing fossil fish paleontology. But I really benefited from Shimada a lot because he gave me the understanding on how to do research and gave me that fundamentals on how to do scientific writing as well as the networking. And upon studying under Dr. Snively at OSU, I began to learn more about dinosaurs, but also more about anatomy and functional morphology. So think about what type of research you want to learn, because you don't just have to just study dinosaurs. You can probably learn about like what research techniques that you can learn from other professors and what you can incorporate in your topics of interest.
Thanks, everybody. This one's from Colin. What are some fellowships or grants that you would recommend applying for as a grad student?
So I can mention a few. So there's the NSF National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, which is a prestigious and competitive award, but if you get it, it's great. It's 3 years of funding, and it's usually includes both your tuition is covered at the university and your annual stipend, and you don't have to do like a research assistantship or a TA-ship. You just get paid to do your research, which is fantastic. It takes a lot of pressure off of you, that you don't have, your time management gets a little bit easier. It's one less thing on your books that you need to work on. And usually also the stipend is higher in pay than some of the TA ships or RA ships. So the financial burden is lifted a little. There's a Ford Family Foundation fellowship, which is similar in that regard. Evan, you mentioned a couple.
Oh, well, there's also the Jurassic Foundation, so that one is actually really good. You can use that to usually use for like travel, but also for kind of like helping fund your research.
And sometimes your graduate schools that you're applying to will have fellowships as well, will have other grants that you can apply through, or that your advisor can recommend you for. So those are some of the ones I can think of.
And also to add to that, like there are societies, the Paleontological Society, the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, all those kind of societies offer funding as well. You just need to join and apply. Kind of on that question, for all of you who are part of a society, do you think students should join those? Do you think they're worth it?
Yeah, definitely. Because one other fellowship I forgot to mention was the McNair Fellowship. So with that one, you do get the experience to actually be a graduate assistant, but also your tuition is covered too. So that's one thing. Also, it makes for good networking as well.
And to answer your question, Gabe, shameless plug, as student rep for the Paleo Society, I would say that societies are very helpful in that as a society member, you can apply for different research and travel grants so that they can offset some of the expenses associated with attending conferences, either in person or hopefully they stay, in a hybrid situation as we move forward past the pandemic, so that if you can't travel, you can still participate virtually, as well as, there is some professional development associated with it through webinars, through other activities that might be available, so that you can, grow your CV. There might be internships available through them and other projects and programs that you can be a part of through the membership. It does, it can be a hardship to pay for the membership, but some of the societies do have either less expensive student fees or ways that you can, essentially like volunteer your time and have your membership paid for. This goes back to what Billie was saying. Sometimes we just need to ask to see what waivers are available to cover for those expenses that can add up over time. But with the memberships, you do usually get access to a lot of journals that you may not have access to. So I think they're a good investment.
Speaking of that, for those of you who might not know, conferences are a big part of being a grad student. Conferences are these annual meetings or, whenever they happen, where you go to like a specific city and you meet up with all the people in the field. You meet a lot of grad students. They can be very fun. There's 8 a.m. talks, which I never make it to, but they exist. But they're really great places to network. So for all of you, what was like your favorite conference experience so far? And kind of like, what is advice you want to give to someone who's attending a conference for the first time? We'll start with Billie.
Yeah, so my first conference was at the American Association of Physical Anthropologists conference, and I didn't know what to expect, and it was I submitted my abstract that I didn't think like I would actually be accepted to present there. I didn't know how conferences worked. But then I realized that you have to pay like to go, not only do you have to pay for the conference, you have to pay for the traveling, you have to pay to stay somewhere, and then you have to take some time off of work to be able to go. So it is pretty pricey. With that being said, there is scholarships available, to help reduce those fees. But for me, someone who, like I previously mentioned, went through the foster care system, so I don't have like family to reach out to and be like, can you cover me? Can you help me? My household depends on my finances. And so I can't take time off of work, and I need to be able to be secured all the way, not just part of the way. So that was a big issue. And I feel like when I went to that conference, the only way that I was able to go was because of my networking. They knew what resources were there because I had missed the scholarship opportunities to go to my first conference because I didn't think I was actually going to go. So when I got accepted, the funding was already done. But I had so many wonderful people around me. So even though I don't have a biological family, I definitely have an academic family. And my academic family includes like, Gabe and everyone at the museum and, professors that have become my friends. And they were like, no, you're going to your first professional conference. You're getting, your butt there. So they're the ones that made it happen. And that's happened. And that is when networking really comes in to help you, because I would not have been able to go to this conference. And it was incredible. It's an incredible experience. It was in Austin, Texas, and I got to see bats, and it was really cool. And I got to meet people, and I did my presentation in this larger room, and it was really just awesome. But also I remember texting Gabe and be like, I don't look like anyone here, like I don't sound like anyone here, and feeling really out of place as well. So also, but that's changing. Like I said, that's changing. But I feel like one of the biggest reasons why that was because of all those hurdles that are put in your way to get to these conferences, So definitely network, get to know people, get to know your professors, get to know people around you, because they'll know what to do. They're more seasoned and they know how to help you get to these conferences. And, sometimes they'll be going to those conferences and they could give you a ride there. You could share. I did an Airbnb with a bunch of people to go to another conference. Like, that is when that networking really comes into play. So that's very important.
Also, this is the hardest.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeanette.
I was just going to say, this is the hardest question you could have asked. I think conferences are like the best part of the year.
I would say that conferences are really fun to go to, but yeah, they're hard to get to, and especially if it's your first time going to a conference, it's really intimidating to stand up there and present your research, and it's really scary to feel like people are judging you. But it's a really great opportunity to meet a lot of people. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to go to an SVP conference in person yet, but I'm really excited to be able to attend at some point in the future in person and meet more people. But I did go to a GSA conference in undergrad, and I presented my research there, and it was a really great opportunity to meet all the other students there, and you get to look into potential advisors when you go, so that's a really great opportunity to see what's going on in the field and see who you might want to work with.
Awesome.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Evan.
Also, it's just something I would like to bring up is that my favorite conference was SVP, and one of the things that I always did before attending was that I would always look up who's presenting, what topics are going to be mentioned, and also during that time I would always email the professors and also the students if they would like to meet more so to discuss more the school networking. I think that's always good if you can get into contact with professors and their students.
Yeah, I agree with Evan on that. That's pretty much exactly how my first and only in-person SVP went, and that was long ago enough that it didn't really affect how the rest of my academic experience would go, but it was daunting. It was fun to meet people, though. Actually, I met Evan for the first time there. Gabe, I think I had known you from just a little bit before that, but yeah, if you can go to a conference or conferences over the course of your life, please do, because they're only going to get more inclusive from here on out, I think.
And I will say that SOCNAS is probably one of the best conferences to attend. That's the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science, and it's rebranding into a more diversity and inclusion science conference. And I didn't realize how much I didn't fit in at the other conferences I attended until I went to SOCNAS and realized that everyone around me came from some similar background as mine, and it wasn't just a celebration of science. It was also a feel-good, cheering me on, for my adversity. So if you have a chance to go to SOCNAS, it is the coolest conference I've ever attended, and they do really good travel grants. I just went through and recommended a bunch of students as a travel grant person, reviewer. So I do recommend applying for them because people take them seriously, and it's, I would say, my favorite conference among the other ones that I've been lucky enough to attend.
I'll also add that for a lot of conferences, they have mentorship programs if it's your first time. GSA has On to the Future. SVP is having something very similar. So it's a great way for you to network, meet people, and before you go to the conference, you can connect online too. Be like, oh, I want to meet you at the conference. Let's go hang out, because being professional, conferences are very much about networking and learning about the sciences. But after that last poster session, you can go out and have some fun. Me and Jeanette always have a bit of fun when we're at a conference. So it's a good time. We keep trying to do karaoke, but that hasn't happened yet at a SVP. I think we'll get it at the next one.
Yeah, that absolutely needs to happen once we are done with this virtual life.
Yes, Tut's in it. I think all of us will get together. We'll have a student karaoke night. You can see us all have fun. It'll be awesome. So we're running near the end of our session. I'm going to end with one more question, And this is from Cam Maskelly, who's a good friend of a lot of us. What advice can you give to people doing paleo without a degree? What makes a, quote, real paleontologist? So we'll kind of just go, everybody can answer that one, and we'll end from there.
Hi, Cam. I feel like we've had this chat before at some of the programs we've been at together, and honestly, it's just partnering up with other people that have that degree, right? That have those networking experiences, like knowing you and knowing the work that you do. I would love to see you partnered up with other people that maybe have access to the funding to get your research published. So building those networks, just because you're not at a point yet to be considered a professional paleontologist, I don't think should limit you. We know plenty of amateur paleontologists that have published important things. I know plenty of amateur paleontologists that work at the dig site that my research is coming from that have found the most important specimens, because you're the ones that have sometimes I feel the extra free time and the energy and dedication to spend on the field and not burdened by the politics of the department, by, teaching requirements, by classes. So you're able to do a lot of the work and just, connect with the people that can help you publish that work and give you additional professional development.
Lynnea, how about you?
I'm going to say that a real paleontologist is someone who is doing the work and investigating paleontology and putting their whole heart and soul into trying to explore Earth's history and the history of life and everything. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you fit the stereotype, because, look at this whole panel right now. Paleontology is changing. It's becoming more diverse. It's becoming more acceptable to be the not stereotypical white male. So paleontology is done by people, and anyone who does that work is a real paleontologist to me.
Well said. Evan, how about you?
Yeah, for that one, it would probably be important that you network with other paleontologists, but also find like a really good support group who supports you, who supports the work that you do, your interest, your enthusiasm, and everything. And also, what's the word? I'm kind of blank on the last word, and passion.
Definitely passion. We're all passionate people here. Tut, what about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Lynnea, Jeanette, and Evan. All of y'all, like, if you are doing the work, if you are contributing to the science and you are helping people, like, that's, to me, that's one of the biggest things that I get out of this. Is I happen to be working on this thing that I love, but I'm also contributing to something that's bigger than myself and is going to help people get invested in science and care about the world that we live in, right? So if you're doing that, you're a real paleontologist. That's the bottom line for me.
And Billie.
Well, yeah, everybody pretty much said, what you need to know. So kind of echo everyone that, you don't have to have a fancy degree to be a paleontologist. You really just need that passion. You could do independent research. In fact, there has been famous paleontologists who never got a degree, maybe an honorary degree, but that didn't go through the traditional route. And, people who have contributed to the scientific realm in paleontology and outside of paleontology, who are janitors of their colleges and still contributed, legit theories and ideas to science. So you don't need to go the college route to do that. So yeah, I would say, like what everyone else say, like, network with people that are doing what you do, and have that passion for paleontology, and you're good to go.
Thanks, Billie. I think it really comes down to it. There is a place for science in everyone's life, and there is a place for everyone in science. So the point of Path of the Paleontologist is to show everyone at home that there are so many different ways to be within this field and be a paleontologist. Today we showed you the start. or in this panel, we showed you the start as the path of the student. But actually, that's not true, because you don't have to start as a student. The start of your path of the paleontology is wherever you take that first step in learning about paleontology. Unfortunately, that comes to the end of our panel. I want to say thank you to all of you for giving us such great advice, sharing amazing stories, and just being so open and talking about it. If you want to connect with everyone, their social media is on the screen, and we'll have links in the description below. Make sure you join us at 2 p.m. Pacific time for our next panel, The Path of the Keeper, or The Path of the Collections Manager. And we'll learn about what it takes to take care of fossils and, organize and talk about spreadsheets and databases. It's a lot more fun than I'm making it sound right now, I promise. But yeah, once again, thank you all so much, and thanks to all of our audience at home. And we hope to see you all at 2 o'clock, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.